Hello and welcome to the show. You have tuned into Renegade Files, your underground connection for investigating unsolved mysteries, conspiracies, and paranormal events so you can explore the deeper stories that others avoid. You are now in the company of outcasts, and I'm your host, Lex Gordon, hacking into your device from the Jungle Villa outpost deep in the uncharted tropics. This is Renegade Files episode 86, The Miami Mall Incident, Shadow Aliens, Portals, and Coverups. New Year's Day in Miami of 2024 started out normal enough, with beachgoers, brunch, boating, and barbecues. That night, the Bayside Marketplace outdoor mall along the waterfront was packed with people shopping, dining, and drinking in the bars. But screams, shots, and chaos shattered the peaceful evening. And as patrons ran for it, they were greeted by arriving police. A lot of police. People were detained, questioned, and their phone photos deleted. What followed was one of the strangest and fastest explosions of internet virality ever seen. Claims of police falsehoods, a cover-up, and shadowy interdimensional beings hit social media in parallel with the official story of teens fighting with fireworks. But just because a claim spreads fast and far doesn't necessarily make it true. There's an old saying, a lie will walk a mile before the truth gets its boots on. Come with me now as we unravel the mysterious mayhem in Renegade Files episode 86, The Miami Mall Incident, Shadow Aliens, Portals, and Coverups. The Miami Mall Incident, Shadow Aliens, Portals, and Coverups. Let's jump right in. This story unfolds in two main parts: the official story and the eyewitness accounts. These two perspectives tell us two very different scenarios. First, I'll give you the facts as presented to us by the authorities and the media concerning the events in this story. Then I'll go over the same incident as told to us by people who were there, footage posted online, and the social media hurricane that took place afterwards. This is a pretty recent mystery and it hinges on contradictions. To put it bluntly, the party line simply doesn't add up. The official reports tell us that on January the 1st, 2024, between 7:45 and 8:30 p.m., calls started to come in to 911 dispatchers reporting disturbances at the Bayside Marketplace Mall on the western shore of Biscayne Bay in Miami. So, on the downtown side, not the beach side. Police reports indicate the calls concerned several teens fighting in the Margaritaville restaurant at the mall, that fireworks had been set off, and that someone had seen a knife. Some 911 calls reported gunshots, but these also turned out to be fireworks, at least according to the media. police were sent to the mall to assist mall security who were having trouble containing the unruly kids. Officer Michael Vega, a Miami police spokesman, told the Miami Herald that a small initial police response failed to contain the situation. So, police called an alert known as a Citywide 3, which is a call for any available officers to respond to the scene. This resulted in one of the largest police responses ever captured on video. Official reports tell us that over 60 police vehicles descended on the mall. I myself counted 98 police cars in one of the most famous photos that looks to have been taken from a high floor of a condominium across the street. I think that photo might be from a video screenshot. Streets surrounding the mall were roadblocked, and in the end, a grand total of 4 teens were arrested on charges of burglary, third-degree grand theft, battery, and resisting arrest without violence. So, running. According to police reports, these charges were for beating up a man who exited his car after someone threw a bottle at it as he drove past. And this happened after police were already on the scene. So that's the official story in a nutshell. Some kids were fighting and throwing fireworks at the mall. Cops came, the kids ran, so more cops came. A lot more. So here are the things, in my opinion, that do make sense about this so far. First of all, it's New Year's Day. New Year's Day is very likely a traditionally busy day for a mall like this. A lot of people are off of work. I guess some of the schools are probably closed, so teenagers are out of school. Because fireworks are popular on New Year's Eve, they might have been more readily available to kids around this time, more so than they might be at other times of the year. Anytime you have a bunch of teenagers together, particularly at night on a holiday weekend, and a holiday that traditionally involves fireworks, it's very likely that some mischief is going to go on. Kids like to fight, and sometimes police are called in to take care of just such a disturbance. So up to this point, all of that sounds perfectly logical. It's quite possible that this is all that happened there that night, which is what law enforcement and the news tell us. But this brings us to the second part here, which are all of the things that call into question this official narrative. To be perfectly frank, this story just doesn't add up. Here's why. In this story, there are several things that seem strange, and that's an understatement. Before we get into specifics, I want to give you a better picture of what this mall is like. The Bayside Marketplace Mall is a multi-story, open-air, city place type of shopping center with restaurants and retail built around a series of courtyards in Miami. The best way to describe it is, imagine an old-school shopping mall from the 80s, but the hallways between the stores have no roof. The stores have roofs, and the areas between them are paved with planters and fountains and benches, but many of those common areas are open to the sky, often under frameworks of a gazebo-like structure overhead. Some of the hallways in the mall are covered, but even those are covered in a sort of translucent type, vented greenhouse-looking roof. At first, this seems like a strange design, but the strategy is that 1, the mall ownership doesn't have to pay to air condition the entire space, And 2, the shops are air conditioned. So in the heat of Miami, that becomes a very real incentive for customers to go inside the stores. And this facility is gorgeous. It flanks a marina where beautiful yachts dock. Many of the restaurants overlook the water and the boats. There's a mojito bar and an outdoor concert stage with views of the Miami skyline. The sensationalism of whatever happened there that night has somehow painted this place as a mall in the hood where teenagers go to fight. But the reality is that this is a very bougie shopping center on some of the most expensive real estate in the country. It'll cost you $30 just to park there. And because it's this sort of system of indoor areas enclosing outdoor spaces, there really aren't doors to go in or out of this mall, as it were. There are many places where you can access the interior corridors and stairways, and that gives people access to the stores, bars, and restaurants that are scattered around, and many of the exteriors of the retail spaces face outward. So they look across the marina or the street, and you can walk along those without being quote-unquote inside the mall. If groups of teenagers started running wild in this place, it would be virtually impossible to corral them because you can't just close the doors to the mall and trap them inside. There are no doors, and there isn't an inside. It isn't just a mall, it's a series of buildings and landings and hallways and the spaces in between them. So that's the scene. Now, let's talk about some of the things that just don't make sense. The first thing is, this is, officially, the police responding to teenagers fighting. Okay, fine. Where are all of the witness videos of this supposed fight? A teenage fight breaks out on New Year's night in a Miami mall in 2024, and not a single person films it with their phone and puts it on social media? Impossible. And when I say that's impossible, I mean it literally. This is where the official story begins to break down for me. There is 0% chance that a bunch of teenagers start fighting in a mall in this day and age and not a single other teenager films it. This would be like saying the Chicago Bears played the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field last week, and miraculously, not one of the fans in attendance that day wore a football jersey. And yet, no videos exist of a single fight from that night in the mall. There are many videos of people running, we'll get to those later, and videos of 100 cop cars with lights flashing, but no videos of the fight that caused it all? Please. One local news station, I think Miami's Channel 10, did air footage of a bunch of teens fighting outside of a building while they reported on this story. But locals have said that footage was from some scuffle that happened a couple years before outside of a movie theater. They recognize the movie theater exterior and remember seeing that exact footage on the news back then. So not only did that video have nothing to do with the Bayside Marketplace fiasco, but it was from a totally different time and a completely different place. Throwing that video up in the background while you're talking about what happened at the Bayside Marketplace that night is exactly fake news. One girl who works at the mall said that there had been a few kids fighting that weekend, but that fight happened the day before. When asked why all the police came on the first, she said, quote, "because of the alien thing." And this leads us to a few videos we do have. One, filmed from a high-rise condo across the street, shows what people say looks like a 10-foot-tall shadow creature walking slowly along the front of the mall, and it's as tall as the building facade. It does look like a tall, gangly gray creature. Police say it was 3 officers walking side by side. But people have asked, how would that make them taller than the building? One article reports that witnesses said there were shadowy gray beings walking around, but that others on social media disagreed and say that it was just 3 policemen walking side by side. So strictly speaking, the way that article frames this video is not true. That's what the police said after the fact, not shoppers who were there. And it's this kind of confusion reporting that stinks of a cover-up to me. I will say that there's a brief second in that video of something walking outside the mall that's shot from the front. So the thing is walking toward the camera. And from that angle, it does look like 3 people walking abreast. And 2 other things. 1, in that split second, it looks like what appears to be stories of a building later in the video are actually wide, tiered steps that lead up to a sculpture or something. And misreading these steps for building stories makes the thing look way taller than it is when the camera moves to view it from the side. And this camera moving from above the scene, it makes me think that this might have been shot from a drone and not a condo. I'm not sure. And number 2, no one in that scene seems to be reacting to this thing walking along. No one is pointing at it or running from it. Again, this makes the case that this is policemen walking together and not a giant creature. But here's the thing about that, which falls into this not making sense file. No one on the scene ever said these creatures were walking around outside the mall, on the sidewalk. People just added the creature idea to this video, which does seem like an optical illusion after the fact. The video in question was actually a video of the insane police numbers at the mall. No one ever said it was of the creatures until the whole thing went viral. So this could be a case of the mainstream media and the authorities attaching this paranormal story to something unrelated and totally explainable in order to marginalize the real claims and testimonies of something out of the ordinary happening that night. It's a very subtle way to look at this, right? Are you with me? Okay, so this gets way weirder, but I do have to impress upon you how quickly this story moved. I mean, it was only a year and a half ago, so maybe you remember it, and I'm not sure how deep into paranormal Twitter or Instagram you were at the time. But suffice it to say, if the keywords aliens, interdimensional, Miami, and police were in a single post in January 2024, that post was likely to show up in my algorithm. My point is that I live in this area. So not only was this national news, but it's on my local turf. And the second I heard about a commotion drawing 100 cop cars to a mall in Miami, I instantly heard the stories of a cover-up and large unexplainable beings. It was simultaneous. The first time I heard the story, which was the next day, I heard that the news and the authorities weren't telling the truth about it that night, and that it wasn't a fight, and that the reason the police showed up in the hundreds was because some kind of interdimensional shadow creatures were inside the mall, and it caused people to freak out. We'll get into the really bizarre parts soon, but first I wanted to read a headline from a newspaper in Miami on January the 5th, 2024. Quote, "Rumors of shadow aliens at Bayside Marketplace go viral after large fight among teens creates chaos." Okay, what? Think about that. Why would rumors of shadow aliens go viral after a fight? When a fight really breaks out at the mall, people say things like, "It wasn't me. It was a gang. Man, that was kids from Westwood," or whatever. They don't just say it was shadow aliens out of the blue. Kids get in a fight at the mall, and everyone there just says it was aliens for no reason. I mean, you have to admit, that's crazy even for Florida. Now, let's get into some of those original claims that set this whole thing off. One of the first things was a Twitter post made at 5:37 a.m. on January the 5th, 2024, so just 4 days after the incident. This Twitter post or X post or whatever, I am so mentally exhausted from navigating that. Anyway, whatever you call them, this post got hundreds of thousands of views right away, and it went on to continually rack up traffic on its way to being legitimately viral. It was posted by a person named Mo, whose account was @Moab2597, but as far as I can tell, that account has been hijacked by some politically leaning sports commentator or something. I don't know. I'm really not sure. But whoever's posting on X now under that name does not seem to be the original poster who had so much to say about the creatures in the Miami Mall. So let's take a trip back in time and read what the original poster did have to say. And I'm just going to read from these series of a few tweets. Okay, here we go. "I was at the Miami Mall yesterday and the government is lying. There were no kids fighting. Everyone started panicking because these gray creatures were walking around. They didn't make any noises or sounds, but stared and watched you move. I tried to take a video, but every time I would try to, it would just bug out. They set a perimeter and wouldn't let anybody out or in unless they went through their photos. We were visited by aliens and the government is covering it up. They were about 6 to 7 feet tall and walked very slowly. They could turn their head completely around and it seemed like they could change forms. Like they didn't have any bones and could bend their body in whatever way. No fingers or feet, just arms and legs. They could also seemingly teleport. They weren't walking around normally, but instead disappearing and then quickly reappearing somewhere else. This allowed them to walk through some of the glass displays in the mall and through walls. You couldn't escape if they wanted to kill. But they didn't seem aggressive, nor did they seem like they wanted to kill anybody. It almost seemed like they were lost. But they also weren't scared of the army of police that was all around. They must have felt like they were far superior. Okay, so that's it for Mo and her viral tweet X post microblog story published on the social media bot fest we call X, that artist formerly known as a Bluebird Twitter political echo chamber for the left, and now an irrelevant toxic time drain fueled by access media celebrities and right-wing warhawk apologists. And her X post tweet was one of the first things to go widespread viral about the Miami Mall. So a lot of people who were there that night were saying that what the police reported as fireworks were not really fireworks, but were customers in the mall whipping out their own guns and shooting at whatever these tall shadow creatures were. People who were there say that's what the riot was about. It was everyone running from these things. Multiple people said that there were 3 of them, and they were all walking together. And by many accounts, they emerged from some portal, walked through the mall and kind of ignored everyone, but it freaked everyone out because they were 10 feet tall and looked like shadow alien creatures. People started shooting at them, and it wasn't doing anything, so everyone was just kind of running, and it created this huge chaotic scene. I also have to say that every single word in those 3 or 4 tweets from Mo was written entirely with the caps locks on. So there's that. So in those Twitter posts, that person also tells us that power was shut down for several blocks around the mall that night, and that all the police radio traffic on the scanners went dead at the same time, and that black helicopters were seen flying without lights over the mall. Now, I think the whole thing about the power being off in that area is true. I found a report from FPL, which is the Florida Power and Light Company in that area, which does tell us how many households were out of power at the time. A lot. Not only that, but a lot of witnesses in the area made this observation that while the police descended upon the mall, that power was cut off in the surrounding neighborhoods. In addition to that, a lot of people reported seeing these unmarked black helicopters flying around. And you know it's getting real when you see those. And anyway, there's some debate online as to whether or not the police radio traffic did go silent. Some people say that the police turned the scanners off, which anyone saying that doesn't really understand how a police scanner works. And whether or not the radio traffic was accessible or not is something that's really hard to prove in hindsight. But either way, it's just another fishy component of this whole story. The main thing I can't overstate here is the sheer astounding police response to the situation. I know I keep saying it, and you can see the pictures and the dark intel files on Patreon if you want, but it's amazing how many policemen were there. I've seen interviews online with people who live in the area saying things like they've never seen that many police for anything or any reason. And they grew up there, they lived in Miami for 40 years or whatever, so that's saying something. I used to live in South Florida, and when I did, if you didn't hear a police siren for 10 seconds, it got your attention. Another thing that we hear about over and over is that air traffic over the mall was locked down, and that takeoffs and landings at the nearby airports were frozen and delayed during this whole incident. Why would you do that for kids fighting in the mall? None of this makes any sense. There's also another facet to this case that very much deserves a mention. In the days that followed the event, many observed that this could have been a psyop to distract the public from the initial supposed release of the Epstein client list. The release of Epstein's list had been in the news at the time, and it was supposed to go public just a few days after this Miami Mall fiasco. Alert and aware people saw this big, unexplainable public display that had generated incredibly viral posts about aliens that were now being covered up by the mainstream as an obvious false flag to set up as a public distraction from the Epstein thing. It's quite possible. I would never put it past them. But if this was a false flag distraction from the Epstein client list, then it was a pretty extensive and elaborate one. The most important thing to remember about that is Epstein didn't kill himself. In addition to the videos showing hundreds of police cars there are a few videos from inside the mall. And from the testimony of most of the people that were there who were saying that something weird was going on, the inside of this shopping center was where the action took place. So within the corridors. I know I said there's no inside to it, but you know what I mean. There's one video that shows this glowing ball type of a portal open up. People around it seemed to be startled. They fell over off of benches and ran out of the way. A couple people you can see filming it. They move closer. It looks like a ball of light that's about the size of a washer or a dryer, if that appliance was a globe. It undulates and sort of moves in and out of form, and then it vanishes, and one guy walks up to the spot where it was and kind of searches around. There's nothing there. Now that video has been shared and reshared and sent around the internet so much that I wasn't able to find the original poster of it. It doesn't really matter. By all accounts, it is footage from inside the mall, but there's no way to know if it's real or fake or CGI or anything. It's impossible to tell. It's grainy, it's gnarly looking, and the people's reactions to it look like they are actually reacting to something, but it's impossible to know. You can't tell exactly what's going on there. This brings up a really good point, which is that even though this was only a year and a half ago, at that time, there was at least some remnant of a debate to be made about whether this or that video was real footage or not. Since then, advances in AI are so staggering that, unfortunately, that argument has become utterly invalid at this point. We are there already, where arguments about whether a video is real or not have become like arguments over whether a horse-drawn carriage is better than the new steam-powered motor coach. People don't have those arguments anymore, and there's no reason to have an argument now about whether a video is real or not, because no one can tell. I'm sure you've seen some of those recent AI videos where the prompts tell the whatever they are in the video to kind of complain about AI. I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff going on, but man, do they look real. But in this story, we do have videos that we know came out at the time, and some of them may be real, and some of them may be creative productions, but at least we can still have a chat about it, and videos that are from that night are still part of the evidence here, so at least we have that. One of those videos show what people say is a creature coming out of this doorway-looking portal. Now, I've watched that video many times, and I do see what they're talking about, but it's very far to the right edge of the screen. It's barely captured in the frame. The whole thing is super low resolution and blurry. And whatever this thing is that they're calling a creature only appears in the last split second of that video. So once again, this is something that's inconclusive. It could be something, but there's absolutely no way to know. Searching through and for videos like this is what led me down an extremely deep rabbit hole, and I ended up finding this story about a group known as Above and Below. This gets really weird, and I'm not making any claims about the validity of this. I'm just going to go through the information that I was able to find based on what the people who are telling us about this tell us, and so that's just sort of what's going on here. So according to one customer who says he was there that night, and I never found out his name, but he seemed like a legitimate, honest person. He was a grown man. I'd say 40 years old would be my guess. He comes across as an honest guy telling a matter-of-fact story, albeit a fantastic one. And he seemed just as surprised about the whole thing as anyone. So what this guy says is that he was in the Bayside Marketplace mall that night, and he was sitting on one of the benches near a planter along one of the main corridors that run between the retail stores there. I guess he was waiting for his girlfriend who was in one of the stores. So while he's sitting there minding his own business, he sees three guys come up and sit on one of the benches that's maybe 15 or 20 feet away from where he is. It's across the walkway on the other side. One of them takes off his backpack and pulls out some piece of electronic equipment that the man initially thought was probably some kind of video gaming console. At first, he didn't think much of it, and it sort of crossed his mind that they were probably bringing whatever this thing was to one of the stores to see if they could either get it worked on, or maybe it was a really old one and possibly worth some money, and maybe they were going to try to sell it. So a few minutes go by, and he realizes that these kids have also pulled an electrical cord out of their bag. They've been fiddling with this machine the whole time, whatever it is, and he realizes that they're having this debate, or a little bit of a discussion among themselves as to whether or not they should plug it in. So where these three younger guys are sitting, this man who tells the story says he thinks they were in their early 20s. So anyway, where these guys are fiddling with this device is a sort of concrete bench that goes around a concrete planter. It's in the shape of a rectangle. And inside the planter and above the back of what would be the bench, there's an area where there's ferns and foliage plants growing. And in the center of those plants, there's a column that sticks up about 3 feet above the tops of the plants. It's maybe 4 inches in diameter. It has a light on top of it, and apparently somewhere on that column is an electrical outlet. So the guy telling us this story says that in hindsight, he realized that the kids probably knew there was an electrical outlet there already. He thinks that's why they chose that spot. So he watches these guys debate for a minute or so, and at some point, they all seem to agree. And they're like, yeah, let's do this. So they put the box on the bench. 2 of the guys stand up and back up a little ways, and the third guy gets up on his knees on the bench seat, leans across the plants, and plugs the box in. He grabs his empty backpack and takes a few steps away to join his 2 friends, who stand there together and look at the box. At this point, the man telling us this story realizes that this might be one of those situations where the best thing to do would be to get out of there. He has no idea what this box is. He doesn't know what these guys are up to, but he gets that feeling that he'd rather not stick around to find out. So he gets up from the bench and starts to walk away from the scene. He crosses the open hallway and climbs up the stairs to the landing on the other side, which crosses in front of the stores, one of which where his girlfriend is. He's going to walk by and grab her and tell her, come on, it's time to get out of here. As he's walking along that 2nd story landing toward the store, he hears some electrical humming, turns back, and from that higher vantage point, looking down upon the box and the bench, he sees multicolored lights swirling around the thing. It's buzzing and popping and crackling. The 3 kids who had plugged it in don't seem to be anywhere around. And then the box makes a loud popping sound, and it's suddenly surrounded by what he described as a black void. He grabs the door handle into the store where he thinks his girlfriend is, looks back down one more time, hears people screaming, and sees what he describes as a 10-foot tall shadow creature coming out of the black void over the box. The guy collects his girlfriend and they run for it with everyone else. They have to go back down the stairs to get outside, and at the bottom of those stairs on the other end of that breezeway, he sees the 3 guys just standing there and watching everybody run like maniacs. He doesn't really want to confront them, but he can't help himself, and as he's walking by, he just says to them, "Who are you guys?" The guy in the middle, the one with the empty backpack, says to him, "Above and below." The man asks, "What the hell is that?" And the same guy says, "Realm hackers." So this guy and his girl make it out of there no problem. But the entire scene is chaos and everyone is freaking out. They find their car, they deal with the traffic, and eventually they make their way home. Right away, as soon as he gets home, he goes online and starts doing research to find anything he can about the Realm hackers. This guy is some kind of engineer, so he knows his way around a computer, and the whole thing leads him to some nefarious corners of the internet, and what he learns is, according to him, that the Realm hackers are some shadowy, anti-social anarchist group whose mission it is to open portals to lower dimensions in public places. For what reason, I have no idea. And according to this guy who's telling us this story, since then, all of that information he found initially on the first night concerning the Realm hackers has been either scrubbed entirely or moved into even sketchier corners of the dark web. There's also a video made by a guy called Richard Bruce on Rumble, and his video is around a few other places too, and he does a good job of explaining what above and below is and what they do and why. Also a bit about how. So I'm going to give Richard credit with a link in the show notes to his Rumble video, but in that video, when Richard describes the equipment these guys use, it seems a lot more involved than the basic video gaming console thing that our anonymous friend described seeing these kids plug in. There is also a pretty long Instagram post by someone called Detox Art in Texas, and between the RB video and this Insta post comes the bulk of what I could find on the Realm hackers. Just to paraphrase the information both of these sources give us, we learned that a group called Above and Below, who say they are Realm hackers, use some device to open lower dimension portals in public places just for the fun of it. I don't know, it's kind of crazy. Like I said, I'm not really vouching for any of this, I'm just telling you what I found. So here's what they tell us. Opening a lower dimension portal is a new type of event called rifting, since the device used to tune in and rip open these dimensions is called an RFT box. An RFT box is a modified radio frequency tuner made in the 80s, and it's combined with a household kitchen pressure cooker that has been, quote, brutally modified with a copper-wrapped obsidian core that floats in red mercury, a substance readily available on the dark web, end quote. This device is then electrically charged under pressure, and it creates a distortion in time-space called a swell. The swell is cut with a concentrated radio wave produced by the RFT box, and this causes a tear between the dimensions. In other words, it opens a temporary doorway. Most entities that can navigate through these makeshift portals are considered corrupted energy leeches, which seem to be some kind of succubus-class demogorg who are subservient to the higher-ranking interdimensional creatures who, in some ill-defined way, manage them. The group of teens that opened the first dimensional doorway in Bayside Mall in Miami said, quote, "We knew we wanted a high concentration of people that feed off of dopamine to experience the event. Since these creatures feed off of fear and terror to gain new strength and levels and abilities, we needed to expose them to as many souls in a confined space as we could. And a shopping mall was the perfect place." End quote. These interdimensional creatures aren't really physical. They're not really violent, but they are more hungry and curious, almost looking famished and lost. So that parallels what Mo told us in her Twitter post. So continuing with these sources, they say that these creatures bumble around and randomly flail as they glitch in and out of our reality due to energy loss. They must consume to stay here. So the more people that look at them in fear, the stronger they get. They actually have faces, but choose to hide them, as this method induces a more concentrated spike of initial terror in all who witness them. Most law enforcement have already been trained in the corrupted energy leech logistics protocol known as CEL. We are also told that the CEL protocol is a method where a huge swarm of law enforcement officers use multiple sound generators to make directed sound streams that irritate the creatures, and in this way, they can make them walk in the directions they want them to, and I guess drive them back out through the portals, or diminish their energy to the point where they glitch out and vanish. And this is very interesting because we do have people reporting these weird whistling sounds. So that's it for the info in that video and that Insta post, basically, and I'm just telling you what I learned there. Like I said, the information does align with Mo's claims that the creatures looked lost, and it does line up with the hundreds of police officers that we know were on the scene, and it sort of hints to this weird whistling sound people claim to hear. But if every law enforcement officer was trained in corralling shadow beings back into lower dimensions using sound guns, I'd like to think we would know about it, but who knows at this point. As far as information on the realm hacking group above and below, this is basically all I've been able to find out. If I knew exactly what I was looking for, I might be able to dig through the Wayback Machine and find more information, but most of what I've found, and just as importantly have not found, suggests that whomever and whatever this group is, it appears that they've gone pretty dark. One thing I want to mention from this whole realm hacker angle is this recurring notion that part of what these guys are up to involves making this device that uses red mercury as one of its components. So if you go online, the top searches you'll find are a bunch of articles and a Wikipedia page all telling you that red mercury is fiction, that it doesn't exist, and it's basically people making stuff up. But ironically, at the same time, you can find tons of information on a substance called mercury sulfide, which is a solid mineral, is bright red, and is actually one of the main sources of deriving everyday common silver liquid mercury. So I'm always skeptical when I see situations like this, where mainstream information sources like Wikipedia talk out of both sides of their mouth. On one page telling you red mercury doesn't exist, and on another page telling you all about mercury sulfide, which is a red form of solid mercury. Another theory about what was going on at the Miami Mall that night is this sort of biblical return of the Nephilim. You can find many videos where people are debating and espousing this theory, but the basics of it are that the Bible tells us that these fallen angels mated with humankind to produce these giant superhuman beings called the Nephilim, and that these 10-foot tall shadowy monsters are what we saw in the Miami Mall, and that they're the return of these biblical monsters. This is a very strange story with a lot of ins and outs. And there's one more thing that I want to touch on, and this is something that I thought of independently, and it may be an idea that others have had as well, and it's not terribly involved, it's just an observation. So here it is, and it has to do with a sort of predictive programming. So in the Miami Mall incident, the police and the media tell us that teenagers started a fight and were shooting off fireworks. Hundreds of policemen and at least 100 police cars showed up and arrested a grand total of 4 kids. And right away, social media lit up saying that no, this had nothing to do with any kids fighting, that there were these giant interdimensional shadow alien creatures moving in and out of existence, and that's what everyone was freaking out about. Now, that's a bizarre story to say the least, because it's just such an unlikely weird thing for people to make up. And yes, I know people make stuff up about aliens and UFOs all the time, but inside them all, it's just weird. So this is something I thought of while I was working on the episode, and it has to do, once again, with the TV series called Stranger Things. Stranger Things seems to be coming up a lot lately, which is kind of odd, but not terribly out of the ordinary considering the subject matter that we tackle here on Renegade Files. But while I was working on this episode, I remembered something, and I can't help but think of it as paralleling this story to the point of predictive programming. It was Stranger Things, I think season 3, where a giant creature from another realm comes into this world through a portal underneath a shopping mall. The government tries to cover it up, a bunch of teenagers get mixed up in the whole thing, and this giant interdimensional creature descends on the kids in the shopping mall. And what do the kids fight the creature with? Fireworks. Remember? So don't you think it's just a little ironic that years before we have a season of Stranger Things where teenagers in a mall fight a giant interdimensional being using fireworks? And then a few years later, we have this thing at the Miami Mall where the police and the media tell us a bunch of kids were fighting with fireworks, but the people who were there tell us that actually it was a giant interdimensional alien shadow being walking through the mall, and that's what caused the chaos. At this point, it's redundant to say that there's something weird going on here. This is one of those cases where people using their common sense and simple abilities of observation didn't believe the official story right off the bat. Even before the stories of the paranormal spread widely, everyone who saw that video from above of all the police cars instantly said that that's not for kids fighting at the mall. It was obvious. That was an incredible show of force that no one had ever seen before. I mean, think about it. This is something like 20 times the amount of policemen who showed up to Columbine. This insane level of response simply does not match up with the official reason. And then, the second that story hits the news, the whole area chimes in with people crying foul. They're not telling you the truth. No, that's not what happened at all. People were freaking out because there were giant, shadowy, interdimensional alien creatures that exited a portal and walked around through the mall. We were watching them phase in and out of form. Gangster kids in the mall were shooting at them as everyone ran for their lives, and the cops must have known something about these creatures because that's why so many of them showed up. These were the common stories of the average people coming out of the place that night. It's crazy. They said the police were stopping them, not because anybody was fighting in the mall, but to make them delete their videos and photos from their phones before they were allowed to freely leave. And stories like that just drive home the point that I was making earlier, which is, you're not going to tell me that in this day and age a bunch of teenagers are fighting at the mall in Miami and no other teenagers are filming it. That's just not going to happen. And even if the police did make them delete the videos of the fight, which seems like a weird thing to do under the circumstances, then those videos would surely start to surface a day or two later. Even if you delete a photo or a video off your phone, you have like a month you can go back into the deleted files and get access to it. So that whole thing makes me believe that there was no fight. But then that begs the question, which is, okay, fine, there's no footage of a fight because there was no fight, but then where is the late in the game surfacing video footage of these giant aliens? Now, arguably there is some, but those so-called videos of these Miami Mall creatures make the old school blurry pictures of Bigfoot look like 4K cinema. So where is the clear footage of one of these things? Our hero Mo tells us she tried to get pictures and videos of the things, and every time she did, her phone would glitch out. I would love to see something definitive. If anyone has anything, leave a link to it in a comment on our latest Instagram post, where we are at Renegade Files on Instagram. Give us a follow while you're there. I'm trying to build up the Instagram page. I actually like Instagram as far as social media goes. It's a generally positive community, and I'm a very visual person, so I like the platform. I post stuff there periodically. And it's a good way to stay in touch with Renegade Files and know when the new shows are coming out, so find us there and say hi. So yeah, these Miami Mall stories are crazy, but when you dig into it, what you can find under the surface here, the stories just get weirder and weirder. This is probably one of those things that you could spend an enormous amount of time researching and digging into. I've spent a great deal. I had a lot of fun doing this episode, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. As far as what I could find, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you sincerely for investigating the Miami Mall incident, shadow aliens, portals, and cover-ups with me. Also, remember to check out Renegade Files Short Drives, which are shorter episodes posting every Friday all summer. They're my gifts to you for being a part of the show and for helping the show grow by subscribing, following, sharing us, and giving us 5-star ratings. If you're in the habit of being super cool, then tap the link in the show notes to find our Patreon page, which is what keeps diesel in the generators here at the Jungleville Outpost. Try it for free for a whole week, get bonus episodes and more, and help me keep making these episodes for you. Thank you so much if you're an RFA agent in our Patreon community already. You make the show work. I am so happy to have you in the Renegade Files crew. See you next time. I'm your host, Lex Gordon. Stay wild, Nephilim child.